Okay, tonight we're going to talk about a biblical and scientific approach to climate change and how it's being used by the forces of darkness. Well, Satan, whenever he tells a lie, he always has a little bit of truth in it. The climate is changing, but the big problem that we're going to address is whether it's man-caused climate change or whether it's a natural thing that's happening as part of God's creation. And anyway, we're going to look at what the Bible has to say, and some of the scientists that I look at are ones that question climate change, and also how it's used by the forces of darkness. And we talked about the forces of darkness last week, and they're taking over our society. And the main one, they're all satanic, and the main one is Baal, and he wants to control, and Ashtoreth is the seducer, and Moloch is he's the one, the destroyer and the agent of death. So our society is being taken over by the forces of darkness, but the forces of light have to fight back, and that's why God put us here. So looking at some of the biblical perspectives is, first of all, the universe and earth was created about 6,000 years ago through and for Jesus Christ. The earth was created for mankind, is for mankind to be habited in this earth, and it was created for that primary purpose. Christ holds his creation together. Mankind is called to be stewards of God's creation. We are to worship the Creator, not the creation or Mother Earth, which a lot of the climate change people do. And then God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. He didn't say, wait till you get too many people, then you have to cut it back. He said, fill the earth, and God had plans for the earth to be filled to the number that he wants us to fill it to. The final plan is coming to completion in his time, his perfect time. So when it's reached the limit, he'll let us know. And anyway, talking about stewardship, a part of good stewardship, Christians should be at the forefront of a decision-making process that balances the needs of all the stakeholders, both in terms of economic development and minimizing negative impact on the environment. So we want to have a good environment. We want to leave the environment better than it was when we got here as Christians. And when I go to Christian rallies opposed to atheistic rallies, the place is picked up by the Christians and it's left a mess by the atheists, and about the same true in the cities in the United States. But a Bible-based approach to government, the environment, and justice will result in human flourishing, as it has in every country that has been strongly influenced by the Bible's teaching. So we got to provide for the people and use the resources that God has given us and use it in a good way. So storms, floods, earthquakes are indeed part of the present world. We sometimes call them natural disasters, but they are not a surprise to God. Yes, God certainly can control the weather and send deadly storms. Psalms 148, verse 8, declares the storms do his bidding. The Bible in many places records weather events that God ordained as judgment or blessing on people. That is, the weather is under God's control. A well-known example is Joseph's 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine in Egypt, according to Genesis chapter 41. Also under the Mosaic law, Israel's idolatry invited crop failures, and this is warned twice in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, that bad things happen when you worship demons, basically. We have a biblical basis for our confidence that the climate is designed to be broadly stable. After the flood, God promised, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Genesis 8:22. This suggests that Earth would quickly recover from the catastrophic climate change that occurred with the flood, and the ensuing ice age, and things would be under control. That is, Earth's climate was designed neither to be chaotic nor prone to extreme changes. Imposed on all an overall stable climate are smaller natural cycles. In such a situation, we might expect times in the past where temperatures were similar to today. In a biblical worldview, from the beginning, humans were created to care for and rule over the earth, Genesis chapters 1 and 2, and everything in it. This is called the dominion mandate. In the modern secular view, based as it is on the narrative of deep time evolution, humans are latecomers. Some then take the view that the environment worked perfectly well for hundreds of millions of years before humans arrived. Thus, they reason that if we get humans out of the equation, the environment will function much better. In effect, that is what is being done in many parts of the world. And that's, we'll see, is happening and is part of the plan today by many people. The Luciferian globalists have inscribed Agenda 21, a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, very clearly carved in the Georgia Guidestone. Remember that coming down recently? How longer are you going to be a coincidence theorist? And it says here, let's see, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So you see part of this agenda is like, we got to keep it lower because nature can't handle that many people. And this is basically Moloch's idea, I believe. And here's the Billionaires Club, meet to discuss depopulation. Quote from David Rockefeller, we are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and nations will accept the new world order. These guys are all concerned about climate change and saying they're doing, but they all have several houses and several yachts and several luxury vehicles and airplanes, and they're not going to cut back. They want everybody else to cut back, but they aren't going to cut back. For those that believe there is a climate crisis, please research the global environment conditions pre-flood. The earth was completely tropical. We know this now. The earth is still in a state of flux from the catastrophic events unleashed by God during the global flood, like a pendulum swinging after being disturbed. And so we know now that Antarctica had a tropic environment below all the ice that's down there, and all the way in the North Pole, the Antarctic, and all around the earth it was a tropical environment, and that was God's plan originally for the earth, and it changed dramatically afterwards, but God's still in control, and it's still not going to go out of control. It is a Babel mentality is what they call it. People seem to think that they can be like God, even controlling the weather, as Jesus did when he stilled the storm on the Lake of Galilee. So they think they're God. That's Satan's promise. You'll be like God. You'll be able to determine good and evil, and you'll be wise in your own eyes. And it should be remembered that carbon dioxide was part of God's very good creation. Plants breathe carbon dioxide, and there's evidence that increased atmospheric carbon dioxide is causing more plants to grow, even in dry areas. There are also indications that the pre-flood world may have had more atmospheric carbon dioxide than we do at present. And this increased CO2 may have contributed to a much more temperate pre-flood climate. So even if CO2 is warming the planet today, Christians have no reason to panic over the issue. And so this is all part of God's plan. And actually I worked on a farm, and they had up in Michigan, and they had greenhouses there. and they planted it in the colder weather before they planted it, and they pumped carbon dioxide into the greenhouse to help them grow. And so, but those who see climate change as a dire threat generally deny biblical history. In fact, elements of full-blown paganism sometimes pop up in the environmental movement. For instance, a United Nations official opened the 2010 Cancun Climate Summit by invoking a Mayan jaguar goddess. It probably was another one of the three, just with a different name. Many evangelical Christians think global warming is a serious issue that demands drastic action. Climate change proponents say their case is built on scientific evidence. However, Old Earth beliefs actually play a major contributor to climate change alarmists. So that's what the Bible says. The earth is young, and they think it's old, and that's part of the worldview behind the two different sides of the issue. So we're going to look at some of the science behind climate change, and believe it or not, there were 41 climate disasters predicted since 1967. The record so far, 0 and 41, and not a single one has come true. Science, here's a quote from E. Renan, science is a religion. Science alone will henceforth make the creeds. Science alone can solve for men the eternal problems, the solution of which his nature imperatively demands. So this is how they look at it. And this is what happens. Once you believe in evolution, you'll believe in science, and science becomes a religion, and you'll trust in science no matter what it tells you to believe it. And over 1,000 sensitive emails and documents from Britain's Climate Research Unit, CRU, at the University of East Anglia were published online in late November 2009 without CRU's permission. And so we get an insight into their thinking of the scientists that are part of this. And one email in particular that has raised questions appeared to have been sent from CRU Director Phil Jones and uses the words trick and hide in relation to presentation of climate data. There's a quote, I just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real temps to each series for the last 20 years, 1980 onwards. From 1961 for Keiths to hide the decline in temperature, the email states. So they're trying to hide the true temperature change, and this is what they're thinking about global cooling. And so a basic tenet of science is that you can do repeatable experiments. You can't with climate change. Science cannot prove theories to be true, only that they are false, but they say they prove them to be true. Correlation does not mean causation. If two things are happening and you think that this is happening because of this, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Science is also often captured by a ruling paradigm, and that's old age philosophy. Peer review does not ensure truth, and they always demand that we show peer reviews for our side, but they won't allow us to publish a peer review. And so, failed predictions are a major fruit of climate activism, justifying skepticism. Anyone who remembers the 70s will recall that we were all going to freeze in another ice age. Of course, we could do nothing about that, so some of the same experts who were running with the switch to global warming, and then when the temperature data did not match the models that gave the dire predictions, it morphed into climate change. Also popular were acid rain and the ozone hole. And the ozone hole was all caused by big business. And the manufacturer of Freon was going to lose their patent on Freon, and then it would be produced by anyone, and they wouldn't make any money off of it. So they said Freon was causing the ozone hole to increase, and we got to do it, shut it off. So they came up with a new thing that's much more dangerous to the environment than Freon was, and the ozone hole just hasn't changed at all. In 1989, the UN said entire nations would be wiped out by the year 2000 if sea levels level rises are not stopped. Did this happen? No. Tuvalu, a Pacific Ocean nation of atoll islands, atoll is a favorite poster child for this claim. However, Tuvalu has increased 3% in land area over the last 40 years. A survey published in 2018 of 30 Pacific islands and Indian Ocean atolls, including 709 islands, reveal no atoll or island has lost land area in the recent decades. So this is when the UN predicted this global disaster in June 29, 1989, that they're all going to be everything's going to go underwater. Here's some examples. 99 years of sea level rise. This is Palm Beach, Sydney. You see on the top there, it's got quite a bit of land, and on the bottom, it's got maybe a little more land. And for years, they called it global warming, but now they've proven it over and over that no such thing is happening. Then they started calling it climate change. Again, it is a hoax. So here's an unprecedented climate change that has caused the level at Sydney Harbor to raise approximately 0.0 centimeters over the past 140 years. You see, it's 2 pictures. So actual climate change pronouncements by scientists, 1970, we'll be in an ice age by 2000. 76, global cooling will cause a world war by 2000. Global warming in 1989, global warming and rising sea levels will wipe entire nations off the map by 2000. We have 5 to 10 years to save the rainforest in 1990. 1999, the Himalayan glaciers will be gone in 10 years. 2000, snow will soon be a thing of the past. 2007, global warming will cause fewer hurricanes. 2008, the Arctic will be ice-free by 2013. 2012, global warming will cause more hurricanes. It was less hurricanes, then 5 years later it's more. 24, the science is settled. No, it's not. Big problem was polar bears, and they use this to get children worried about climate change, that all the polar bears are going to die. Polar bear numbers, it was predicted, would decline, and were even threatened with extinction due to a shrinking area of Arctic sea ice. Such dire predictions were caused by Al Gore, Michael Mann, and others to play on the emotions of the public to support radical action on climate change. All these predictions of climate change involved more taxation and more government. Mann even published a children's book in 2018 using polar bears to capture the imagination of children. Since 2005, the global polar bear population has increased. Even so, we wonder why a typical environmentalist would be at all concerned. They all are very into what the scientists say, but it just isn't logical. If polar bears go extinct, so what? Something else will evolve to fill their place or not, but it does not matter either way if life on Earth is nothing more than a cosmic accident. The fact that they are trying to make emotional, moral arguments when they have no basis for doing so only shows this is more about manipulation of public opinion than about science. Here's a chart of the polar bear since 1950, and its thousands in 1980s is up to 20,000 a year. 2020 it's up to 40,000, so it's not a big problem. Here's another look at change in ocean heat content. And the red line is the climate model that they predict would happen, and this is from 2003. And look what happened. It stayed right down low. It's been constant. Very little change. Here's two different surface temperatures for the USA. In 1998, they came out with a thin line, and it stayed down there, and all of a sudden it had a hockey stick at the end. And they said, look what's happening here, and it's all gone up. And this is the corrected version. Oh, this is from 1400. And so the dark line is the corrected version, and you see it was hotter, and then it got cooler, and that's not a problem. They tell us that CO2 is the cause of this global warming, and they use the hockey stick diagram used in the 90s to validate this point. We know that the rise in temperatures change started before the rise in CO2 man-made, proving that CO2 did not cause the warming after all. Two significant changes happened to the Earth's climate in the last 1,000 years. In the Middle Ages in 1250 AD was the medieval warm period, and in 1650, the Little Ice Age. You might have heard of those. Those happened before human industry could influence climate change. It's more likely that climate change occur naturally and just part of the cycle. Climate physics have concluded that climate change is related to fluctuating solar outputs to the Earth's temperature. Humans play a very small role, but other factors account for the changes we see. So here you see the medieval warm period and the Ice Age. So looking at the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we have a diagram over there on the side. It shows water vapor is the most significant greenhouse gas, accounting for 95% of Earth's greenhouse effect. CO2 is only 3.6% of greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effects over 99% natural. Nature produces 99.72 of the greenhouse effects. Man only contributes only 1/3 of 1%. Conclusion, water vapors, which absorb and trap heat from the sun, is the most dominant factor over the temperature of our atmosphere. That's all by design. Things are in control. Facts about CO2 on the other side. Atmosphere has 720 billion tons of CO2. Human output has amounted to 6 million, and it's about 0.000008% of the atmosphere. Bottom line, water vapor and not CO2 is the most significant influential greenhouse gas. There is a diminished effect of adding more CO2 because it absorbs only certain infrared frequencies, and most of those already are absorbed by the water. In other words, climate sensitivity decreases as the CO2 concentration increases. In other words, 90% of greenhouse effect of CO2s up from 800 parts per million is already done at 400 parts per million, approximately the current atmospheric concentration. Furthermore, even assuming that all of the 2.2 parts per million per year increases in CO2 due to human activity, it would take nearly 200 years to double the atmosphere level to 800 parts per minute, and that wouldn't cause a problem. Each unit of the CO2 you put into the atmosphere has less and less of a warming impact. Once the atmosphere reaches a saturation point, additional input of CO2 will not really have any major impact. It's like putting insulation in your attic. They give a recommended amount, and after that, you can stack the insulation up to the roof, and it's not going to have no impact. Scientist Antonio Zitrick has disappeared from TV since he publicly stated that global warming depends on the weather engine dominated by the power of the sun. Attributing global warming to human activities is without scientific basis. The climate emergency is just another invention to keep us prisoners to their absurd rules they make up for other absurd emergencies. So he came out with the truth, and actually they found out that when we have a warming period, the other planets have a warming period, so it's obviously must be from the sun. And here's another bunch of dissenters. 1,200 scientists claim that climate change is not real. Here's the truth. On August 28, 2002, Clintel, that describes itself as an independent climate change policy organization, released a World Climate Declaration denouncing climate emergency. The declaration has been signed by over 1,200 signatures from around the world who are experts in various fields related to climate change and the environmental studies. The WCDE is led by Nobel laureate Professor Ivar Givar, a renowned physicist and engineer. This World Climate Declaration questions the integrity of the data already published in relation to proving the existence of climate change and its effect on people and the environment. They claim that climate scientists have been overrun by politics and must focus more on empirical science rather than discussion-based belief. Some more. Professor Judith Curry, a well-known Georgia Institute of Technology climatologist, recently resigned her tenured faculty position. She said the craziness of climate science was a deciding factor. Dr. Curry has long expressed concern about the politicization of the climate change debate and calls for greater openness and transparency in the field. Curry stated on her blog, a deciding factor was that I no longer know what to say to students and postdocs regarding how to navigate the craziness in the field of climate science. Research and other professional activities are professionally rewarded only if they channel in certain directions approved by a politicized academic establishment. When they're not going to get funding for their project, they're not going to get anything, they're not going to have a job, and it's just all part of the sorry game that's going on. And I'm trying to follow the science, but it keeps leading back to the money. It basically sums up the problem she's trying to say. An interesting side note is that many evolutionists absolutely dismiss out of hand the possibility that any observed global warming could be due primarily to natural causes. They think it's all human-made, and this is because they followed the propaganda from the forces of darkness. For instance, the National Center for Science Education has made advocacy of a belief in man-made global warming a priority. Yet even by their own calculations, the lowest probability he can estimate against recent warming being the result of natural causes is 1 in 3 million. Why could it have something to do with their worldview? Absolutely. Actually, now the Pentagon, their number one priority is global warming, climate change. They don't worry about China or Russia or Iran or North Korea. They're focusing on this man-made climate change. Other prominent scientists have also expressed concern that alarmists are being too dogmatic in their claims of the dangers of climate change. In 2011, physicist Ivar Givar, a 1973 Nobel Prize winner, resigned as a fellow of the American Physical Society in protest over its dogmatic stance on the issue. Likewise, respected physicist Hal Lewis also resigned from the American physical society for essentially the same reason. Creation scientists in the past have generally been cautious on the issue, acknowledging that warming has occurred in recent past and that some of it may be human caused. However, they now argue that the alarmism on this issue is unwarranted and largely fueled by an evolutionary worldview. And ICR has done a lot on this. As evidenced by the dissent in this field, even scientists who are not necessarily creationists agree that the issue has been overblown. It appears that the doctrine of climate change was so overshadowed the science of climatology that even some secular scientists are walking away from the craziness. One more, Michael Schellenberg has been a prominent climate change activist. He has been a longtime advisor at the IPCC, International Panel of Climate Crisis, and helped formulate President Obama's energy policy. He now regrets his role in the fear campaign. In his book, Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmness Hurts Us All, he wrote this in 2020. He apologized for his role in scaring people, especially children, with the idea that climate change represents a global crisis and that the world would end unless it was addressed. He exposed many of the false claims and the unintended consequences for the environment. He still believes climate change is happening. It's just not the end of the world. It's not even the most serious environmental problem. On Twitter, Schellenberg commented, negativity has triumphed over positivity. In place of love, forgiveness, kindness, in the kingdom of heaven, today's apocalyptic environmentalism offers fear, anger, and the narrow prospect of avoiding extinction. It's all about fear. So here we have the agenda of the forces of darkness, and this sign carried by this young man kind of lays out the agenda. Climate change is a symptom. Capitalism is the disease. Socialism is the cure. So that's what they believe. And here's a quote from Margaret Thatcher. Global warming provides a marvelous excuse for global socialism. And we know that the Antichrist is going to be a global socialist. So this is all part of the dark agenda. And Socialism by Winston Churchill is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, the gospel of envy. Its inherent version is the equal sharing of misery. They say they're going to make us all equal. They're just going to have a bunch of miserable people with a few elites that are living the high life. Socialism is better than capitalism. When the Berlin Wall fell, who ran to which side? So Baal is the one who's behind it. He's the controller. And so this is basically the agenda of the forces of darkness, and they're using the science of climate change to effectively brainwash and control and mind control a population. You must first need fear, then need a ritual or ceremony which relieves that the fear. That ritual must be simple so anyone can do it. You must make average people feel like heroes for doing exactly as they're told. The tyrant is best served by being in full control of the fear, plus manufacturing the ritual that removes the fear. That pre-manufactured ritual will in turn trick the public into participating in their own enslavement and bring them willingly into the iron grip of the tyrant. So the iron grip of the tyrant who's being used by according to his eternal purpose, which he accomplished in Christ Jesus our Lord. So I want to talk about purpose, and our purpose here is to glorify God and to use his creation, to be good stewards. But the other people, they don't have a good purpose. And they don't have an eternal purpose. And this was found out by the communists, and they said they were building a utopia. And got the people to have that purpose. And they kept the iron fist, and the people believed it. Instead of believing the truth about God, they choose to believe lies, and they worship the creation rather than the Creator himself. To reverence the impersonal creation instead of the personal God who creates us is a perversion designed for escaping moral accountability to the Creator. It's all part of evolution. God indicts those who worship the creation instead of the Creator, Romans 1:18-23, and warns of corrupt morals and behaviors that will result. The slavery of the false teachers, 2 Peter 2:18-19, for they mouth empty, boastful words, and by appealing to lustful desires of sinful nature, they entice people who are just escaping those who live in error. They promise them freedom, why they themselves are slaves of depravity, for a man is a slave of whatever he's master. So they promise them freedom, they just want them to be fellow slaves. False teachers are motivated by animal instincts and desires. Their hearers are enslaved by the same lustful desires. The first time that environmental climate change was used was by the Nazis. And the green sacrifice of Judeo-Christian worldview in the Holocaust. And this was written by Mark Musser. I read it several years ago, but it shows how they use the environmental climate change that they had to get rid of some humans, and that they used to justify it. So here's a description of the book from Amazon. Nancy Oakes shows how the Nazis used a trust in science and the hope of saving the world from environmental change, and blamed the Jews for the problem, and the Nazis carried out a modernized form of human sacrifice, that's Moloch, under the biological, ecological camouflage. The word Holocaust itself comes from whole birth offering. It explicitly shows the anti-biblical worldview and the philosophical roots of modern environmentalists in the renewal of the pagan nature worship. So this was the first time, this is where they came up with this first, and now we've taken it over. Martin Hills, head of the Australian Christian Lobby, says that we must ask what worldview drives the climate change agenda. Where are these people coming from? Without a doubt, the worldview driving the alarmism is not Christian. It is a humanistic, neo-Marxist worldview. Here's another thing. This is when we started introducing it to our culture. It was the Earth Day in 1970. Was irrefutable evidence that the American people understood the environmental threat and wanted action to resolve it. So they set out a pamphlet and told them the world was going to end in 1970 to all the kids at school, and they said the problem was the Christians that were causing it. And while many people have genuine environmental concerns, the radical activist leaders apparently want to undermine the economies of the West, not save the planet. However, to further their agenda, they need to recruit lots of people who will support radical changes to save the planet. In doing so, many innocent people, particularly naive young people, including Christians, are getting caught up in what is ultimately a very destructive agenda. Climate change activists have been beating the same drum since 1978. The New York Post reports in the cosmic cries of the climate apologists, 50 years of spurious scaremongering. This is part of the article. Political leaders, including U.S. climate envoy John Kerry, respected organizations such as the United Nations, and esteemed scientists have been warning us for years. Now the world is about to end. Most recently at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland, that's a demonic area, I think, speakers said the world had reached its last chance to save humanity from the impending doom of the climate catastrophe barreling down the highway of life. At the meeting, Kerry proclaimed that we only have 9 years left to curtail the worst global warming. And here's a quote from the Twilight Zone. Imagine, if you will, a society that thinks the planet's temperature can be controlled by giving money to the United Nations. And we've done a lot of this. And we had a climate change bill, and plus we had an inflation reduction bill, but it was all money to give to the United Nations for climate change. And this is all part of a higher power, and that are going to control and take away our national sovereignty. Climate change zealots think that it's a critical issue that threatens the future of our planet, our children, our society, and on it goes. Many consider those who disagree with them to be dangerous, sometimes calling them climate and science deniers, even terrorists. Unfortunately, many proponents of climate change have been caught in blatant lies or fabricated data to push their agenda. So, 10 warning signs. Absolute authoritism without meaningful accountability. This is all part of the dark agenda. They want this. They want a tyrannical government running everything. No tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. No meaningful financial disclosures regarding budget expenses, such as an independent audit, financial statement. And this is what's happening with all the money we're sending to the United Nations, and they're sending to other countries. They're not using it to do anything about climate change. Unreasonable fear about the outside world, such as impending catastrophe, evil, conspiracy, and persecutions. There is no legitimate reasons to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving negative or even evil, but some have left. Former members also often relate the same stories of abuse, reflect a similar pattern of grievance. There are records, books, news articles, and television programs that document the abuses of the group leader, that's the tyrannical leader that's running this. Followers can feel they'll never be good enough. The group leader is always right. The group leader is the executive means of knowing truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. Here's a little truth in a picture. China produces 90% of the world's carbon emissions pollution. They are building a new coal-fired plant, power plant every week. We are tearing them down. Our plants have gotten really highly efficient through technology. They powderized the coal and they burned it almost as clean as natural gas, but they aren't. They're pouring it into the atmosphere. Question here, why are we not going to China? Shut up and stick to the script. They don't go to China because they're already a communist country. So here's some facts. China's carbon emissions changed since 2000, plus 208%. India's climate emissions changed since 2000, 155%. Evil United States that we got to shut down their carbon emission change since 2000, minus 10%. So we're not the problem. The problem is that we believe in capitalism. The ocean's worst polluters, and we're banning plastics, but you see we're at the bottom, 0.3 million metric tons, and China's way at the top, and all these other countries are much higher. We're not the problem. While the USA was lambasted for pulling out of the Paris Accord, it has actually cut CO2 emissions thanks to its turning to natural gas. Natural gas is a low CO2 emitting fuel and enables a very efficient combined power cycles, electric generation. Conversely, most countries staying in the Paris Accord have failed to meet their targets. Furthermore, if climate change activists were really concerned about saving the planet from the effects of human-produced carbon dioxide, why are they not supporting nuclear power? Ever since the first report in 1990, the IPCC has proposed that nuclear power has a major role to play in replacing fossil fuel power generation, but the activists don't seem too keen. Nuclear energy now provides about 10% of the world's electricity from about 440 reactors, and because it's high energy density, it also is very green. If this energy were produced by fossil fuels, it would emit 2 billion tons of CO2 per year. Nuclear power gives France the cleanest air of any industrial country and the cheapest electricity in Europe, and it even exports some to neighbors. There was a big conspiracy against nuclear power at Chernobyl. There was a horrible accident by an incompetent controller. He did some horrible human errors that no longer can be done. And then we came out with the China syndrome. It was financed by the rich guys. And then 12 days later, 3 Mile Island had a little accident. And that was a setup too, I think. And I think the rich guys paid for it because they don't like people. And the forces of darkness doesn't like people having power like that. Climate and environmental alarmists has prompted some disturbing proposals. For instance, the New York University bioethicist Matthew Leo suggests that we engineer humans to fight climate change. His ideas include altering genes to make people shorter, giving us drugs to take away our taste for meat, giving us cat-like eyes so we can see in the dark, to reduce our nighttime energy use and carbon footprint. He wasn't joking. It was totally serious. There's a lot of other ideas that are going around by these people, and it's just one I read from Israel, and he's being paid by the World Economic Forum, and he wants to control people's thinking. He has all kinds of things. It's just like the Antichrist, I think. It's just like reading the Bible for his proposals. One thought I had was, I think they might propose, the mark of the beast might be more than a mark, because I always had a problem with it, because they says once you get this mark, you're not going to be able to believe anymore. But according to his idea, you're not going to believe anymore because they're going to engineer you so you can't believe anymore. And so that makes more sense. Unsurprisingly, climate panic is also often tied to an unbiblical worldview. Secular scientists deny the Genesis flood, which is the greatest climate change event in history and the only convincing explanation for the Ice Age. Moreover, God promised us a regularly stable climate in the post-flood world. Here are some facts that should be shared over and over to people under the age 45, knowing that they've been lied to. Fact 1, the air is cleaner now than it was in 1950. Fact 2, the water in our Great Lakes and other waterways are cleaner now than they were in 1950. Fact 3, electric vehicles have a small distance of traveling before they have to be charged up for 24 hours, and this really has no impact on global warming. Fact 4, the batteries in the electric vehicles are not recyclable, and after about 6 years of use, they have to be changed at a cost of about $30,000, and making those batteries is very harmful to the environment. Fact 5, electric vehicles are promoted by the ruling elite to control the movement of the population. A gas vehicle can go anywhere, anytime, while electric vehicle can be stopped by shutting down the electrical grid system whenever they want to. We the people are being played. Here's the wind power. A 2-watt wind power windmill, megawatt windmill, contains 260 tons of steel, requiring 170 tons of coking coal, 300 tons of iron ore, all mined and transported and produced by hydrocarbon spewing processes and machines. A windmill could spin until it falls apart and never generate as much energy as it was invested in building it. So it's a cost-benefit evaluation any Christian should figure out. It takes more energy than I'll ever produce, but you can feel good about it, and we send a lot of money to China for those windmills, and I think they're a very bad investment. The economic impact of radical policies to limit CO2 will most seriously hurt the poorest people. Because humans are intelligent and industrious, we can apply our God-given abilities to solve many real environmental issues, especially if we're guided by a Christian worldview. The idea of dangerous climate change due to burning fossil fuels is unfounded in sound science and divorced from biblical history. Foundationally, the issue of climate change involves a deep-seated worldview conflict. As we said earlier, Christians can be concerned about the ecology, and we have a duty to care for the environment. However, the fake anti-Bible deep-time evolutionary history of the planet Earth, based on naturalism, the belief that nature is all there is, feeds into a radical environmental ideology. This has now embraced climate change. So this is a problem, and this is how they're trying to control us, by these climate changes, laws, and spending of money. And we know the Lord is a spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. That's why we have liberty in this country. That's why they had liberty in the Western Europe, and because it was taken over by Christians and set up a Christian system. And here's a quote from Milton Friedman: "Those of us who have been so fortunate as to have been born into a free society tend to take freedom for granted and regard it as a natural state of mankind. It is not. It is a rare and precious thing. Most people throughout history, most people today, have lived in conditions of tyranny and misery, not of freedom and prosperity." And so we got to fight for the biblical worldview. We got to fight for the truth. That's part of our mission. God put us here at the perfect time, and it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let ourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery that they're trying to put on us. The one part of climate change they have to consider is 2 Peter 3, verse 7. "By the same words, the present heaven and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and the destruction of ungodly men." And this is what we got to warn people about. And so we got to remember, God is in control. We got to trust the Lord. Nothing bad's going to happen, and He put us here in the perfect time, and we got to do what we can with what we have, where we are at. So, Alan, let's see, any questions or comments? Any questions? Go ahead and stop the video. You can stop the video, Alan.